with the libraries effect, that will allow me to draw one card. And looks like that's the head of Exodia, which means I've got all 5 pieces, and you lose. Anyway, game 2? Yeah, we'll go to game 2. Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well. Today we have a deck list for an Exodia FTK for the Edison format. Now, this is completely tournament legal, however, if you use it on someone outside of a tournament, they will be obliterated and you'll be spending a lot of time in jail. So, bear that in mind, and I will warn you that this is not the most consistent list, but it's really funny being able to win on one turn before your opponent even gets to play. My history with this deck is this is actually the first deck list I ever built in Yu-Gi-Oh! And that is because you can playtest it alone. I was too shy to go to locals, so I would just sit there and see how often I could Exodia myself. Pretty sad, but I'm glad to bring it back in a tournament format. So we're going to run through the deck list, some tips and tricks, and ways to counter this list. Let's jump straight into it. So if you haven't seen an Exodia FTK list before, at least in Edison, it primarily revolves around this Royal Magical Library card. If you haven't seen it, be thankful, but also its effect is each time a spell card is activated, place a spell counter on this, maximum of 3, but when it has 3, you can remove the spell counters and draw 1 card. And we play a bunch of draw spells, which will help us go through our entire deck on a single turn. So we're going to start with the draw spells here. We have 1 copy of Reload. This is really useful because you can use it in the end phase because it is a quick play spell, but also it's just a way to shuffle any dead cards in your hand or Exodia pieces. Bear in mind, this will shuffle your entire hand, so if you have Mallet, which we also run 1 copy of, and you want to keep some pieces, you will use the Mallet, but if you want to get rid of the whole hand, you'll use Reload. It's really good if you have not many cards in deck. You can just shuffle all of it back and get a new hand, especially while you have the library on the field. And it's very similar with the Mallet. Both just shuffle in all the dead pieces that you don't want to see. So we also run 2 Super Rejuvenation. Now you can run 3 of these. Probably replace 1 of these for another one if you want to. But I found 2 was consistent enough for me. If you don't know the effect, it's during the end phase. You can draw a card up for each dragon you have discarded or tributed from the field. We will be discarding a lot of dragons. So this can draw us, I think it drew me 12 cards since they can stack. So it's a really powerful card for this deck. And you can play it at any time. So you can always get a spell counter off this if it's in the hand. It's basically never dead. We also run 2 Dark Factory of more production or mass production. Now, a lot of lists will run 1 of these, but I actually prefer to run 2. It adds back 2 normal monsters from your grave to your hand. Now, not only can you use this on the Exodia pieces, you can use it on your Blue Eyes, which we'll be showing off soon. And also, there's a Flamvell Guard in there, which is a Dragon Tuner, which will come in handy. So, worst case, if you have no pieces engraved, you can grab those and use it. Use those for either discard fodder or some of the other spells which are coming up. Speaking of the other spells which are coming up, we have 3 cards of consonance. This card is absolutely insane. You discard 1 Dragon Tuner and with 1,000 less attack and then draw 2. When we go through the monsters, I'll show off what we will be using for these here. We also have 3 Toon Table of Contents. This one I see a lot of people not running, but if you draw 1 of these with your Royal Magical Library, that's just a free draw and it's massive deck thinning, since you just search 1 off the other, and then we have 1 monster target, which we'll show off later. So it's insane. Even if you draw 2, it's not too bad, because you can use it to discard fodder or shuffle it back. But I did have a hand where I drew 3, which was sad, but that's really not likely, so it's really good to run. Here we have 3 hand destruction as well. So this is send 2 to the grave from hand. Both players do this, and then both players draw 2. It's worth noting that for Super Rejuvenation, this is sending, it's not discarding, so it doesn't count for your Super Rejuvenation. So bear that in mind for when you're choosing your discard targets. We also run 3 Dark World Dealings. This one does actually discard. Both players draw 1 and discard 1. It's a 1-for-1 really, and it can be super useful. Honestly, it's just another spell which thins out 1 more card and gets you closer to those 5 pieces. And this one is lovely. We don't have this in Modern, but we have 3 Upstart Goblins. If you don't know this, I'm very surprised. Also, just realised this is an old printing, which is quite cute. But opponent gains 1,000, which we don't care about, and we can draw 1. Probably one of the most consistent and heavily used cards in the deck. And then we have 3 trade-in. We run a Blue Eyes package, which we'll be showing off shortly. So these trade-ins can be super, super useful, drawing 2 and discarding one of the bricks in your hand. Going into our monsters, we run 3 Royal Magical Library, since we really want to see it. If you have more than 1 in hand, you can shuffle it back in or discard it. So sometimes people run 2, but I'm very insistent that 3 is needed, because if you see this, you're so much more likely to win on turn 1. And worst case, if you don't win on turn 1 and you draw 2 of them, you can summon it next turn and just pop off again. Now showing off our target for the Toon tables. This is the Blue Eyes Toon Dragon. So this works by, on your 3rd Toon table, you search out the Blue Eyes Toon. And the reason we run that over Toon World is because we can use it with trade-in as well. So as soon as you see a Toon table, you have a trade-in target. So it's super useful in this deck. Some people would argue that it might be worth running Toon World just because it is another spell, which gives you another spell counter. But I found that having a trade-in target, like an extra trade-in target, is super useful. So next up we have our cards of consonance targets. We have 3 of the White Stone of Legend. So whenever this is sent to the graveyard, you can search out a Blue Eyes White Dragon. So it's a bit more deck thinning. So this plus cards of consonance gets you to draw 2 and then search a Blue Eyes, which you can use for the trade-in and discard fodder. And we also run 1 Flamvell Guard. It's literally just a low-level dragon tuner with less than 1,000 attack, full consonance, and you can also search it back with the Dark Factory, which is going to be all the way down here. So if you draw cards of consonance and you have a Blue Eyes and this guy in the grave, you can actually use the 2nd Dark Factory to add him back, which is actually why I run the 2nd Dark Factory. Another reason we run the 2nd Dark Factory is you can discard one of the Dark Factories. It's not like a 6th Exodia piece that you need, so it's super useful, and yeah, just gives you more targets for the consonants. Another reason we run a 4th consonants target in Flamvell Guard is you can actually use any of your discard effects to send this guy to the grave and not feel too guilty about it, because then you won't have a dead consonance in your deck. Of course, we run the search targets for the stones. We run 3 Blue Eyes here. Kind of hard to take these out. I wouldn't take any out because you always want to be able to search them. Yes, they are bricks, but at the same time, they will always be bricks in any deck, so it's worth it to run them. And for the last cards, we obviously have the boy. Let's lay him out properly. Obliterate. Let me know down in the comments, what's your favourite piece? Because mine is the right arm. Someone at local said the right leg. So, and people are saying the head's overrated. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I actually got told to cut this because this card's really overrated. It's really not that good. But no, I think I'm going to keep him in there for this list. Now, something that's worth noting is I don't actually have a side deck for this. There's a bit of a... What's the word? It's a bit of a superstition I have with Exodia decks. If you don't have a side deck, you really do believe in your cards, so you're meant to see Exodia more if you believe. But really, that's just a bullshit reason to not run a side deck. But we do run an extra deck, which is just full of literally everything from my Gemini Edison list that I was running for a while. But honestly, I just put it there, so if your opponent doesn't know what you're playing, they'll see an extra deck, they'll see your 40 cards, and assume you're on something that isn't absolutely stupid. But there are some suggestions I have for the side deck, which I'll put up on the screen now. So one thing I was thinking of doing is putting stall cards in the side deck. So stuff like Level Limit Area B, Gravity Bind, stuff like that. Anything that stops your opponent from attacking, so you can just slow the game down. So instead of going for the full FTK straight away, you can slow the game down and do it a couple of turns later, or just completely pivot into a stall strategy. One card that might be worth running is Future Fusion. That can either go in the main or the side, and you run 5-headed dragon as well. So you can send 5, either the Blue Eyes and the Stones, to the graveyard, so that gets rid of 5 cards from your deck, and then you basically just mill your deck for a bit more, and it's a spell, so you get the counter. It's a fun inclusion, and if they can't deal with it, you summon a 5,000 attack dude. But usually they'll have a way to deal with it. There's not much else on your field that can do anything. And the last card I would consider putting in there is 3 copies of Thunder Dragon. Unfortunately, because it's not actually a dragon, it is the Thunder part of the name for some reason. It doesn't count for your super rejuves, but it is deck thinning and it is discard fodder. So it's good to run. If you're going to run it in the main, I'd consider taking out the Toon tables with the Toon Blue Eyes. But I really don't like the Thunder Dragon. I think it's way less helpful than running the Toon tables, since it doesn't get you any counters. It is just pure deck thinning. One last thing that might be worth running is the Bamboo Sword package. So either 1 or 3 broken bamboo swords and then 3 golden bamboo swords. But again, I feel like without the cursed bamboo sword, which searches out the swords, it's so much less consistent than just having draw spells that straight up draw, without you needing to, 1, equip a monster and see both of those cards in your hand. It feels very much win more in a deck that you don't have room for that. But that is my Exodia list. I find it extremely funny. It's not the best, and it's not going to win you every tournament, but it is a fun list. If you want ways to counter this deck, I'll put those up on the screen now. We've got Thunder King Ryo. That's an insane counter. You can't draw any cards with that. You have Solemn Judgment. Yeah, I know pretty much every list is running Solemn Judgment, but if you judgment the right thing, whether it be the library or the factory of mass production, you just lose. DD Crow, you can banish a piece from the graveyard, so that you can never add it back again. Those are the main counters that I know of, but I'm sure there are more. I mean, Morphing Jar is funny. It can help, or it can really help us. Depending on what we discard. If we discard this, we lose. But if we discard 2 pieces, we're fine. So Morphing Jar can be really, really good or really bad. So it might be worth signing that in, but at the same time, it's not going to do that much. It's quite RNG dependent. Now, a couple of general tips. For the search cards, you want to be, if you don't see library in your opening hand, you want to be using your spells that draw multiple cards earlier on, like the Consonants and the Trade-In, so you're drawing multiple at once, or using as little spells as possible. So say you have a hand that allows you to activate either one of these with an Upstart or a Dark World Dealings, you want to be using these first, because if you see the library, you want to be holding those draw 1 cards, so you can just keep spamming them rather than these cards here, which you'd rather use straight away. Another massive, massive tip with this deck is to always check your graveyard if you are wondering what you should play, because this is a deck of odds. You have to work out what's the highest chance you can see something useful, and so checking your graveyard can let you know, should I go for Consonants or should I, activate Trade-In first? What am I more likely to see coming into those next couple of draws? It really helps with the discards as well. What should I keep? Check the graveyard, figure out what is more likely to show up in your next couple of draws. That way you can discard the ones with the lowest chance and increase those win rates by a couple of %. Another thing that is worth noting in Edison format specifically is you can sometimes be greedy and wait a turn. It's very unlikely you're going to get OTK'd. It can happen, but if you really have a terrible hand that you know is not going anywhere, you can afford to pass a turn. Whilst it's incredibly risky, so the hand has to be absolutely terrible, you can do it. That's all the tips I can think of off the top of my head as a long-time Exodia player, but if there are any more that come to mind, I'll drop them in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know down in the comments what Exodia variants you've run in Edison, and have you ever had any funny stories about Exodia? I know a lot of people popped off when I pulled off Exodia this week. That being said, if you made it this far in the video, please do feel free to hit subscribe. New Yu-Gi-Oh videos each week, and as always, happy dueling.